Friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. I'm Henry Seltzer, and we're going to be talking about the new moon that's coming up this weekend, which is another very powerful new moon, as befits the times that we're living in. I think all of us recognize that astrology can give us clues to what is happening in the zeitgeist, as well as what is happening with us personally and individually. And of course, one way to do that is to look at your own chart and see where the planets are lining up, where the transiting planets in the sky are coming in, beaming in on your chart, and how that's affecting you, and how it gives you another dimension to what you're going through. You can see further into it. You can see how this is part of a bigger pattern. You can see how it's part of what you've been trying to absorb and to learn about who the heck you are, which is really the purpose, I believe, of life here on Earth, is to grow in our understanding of ourselves and to be able to act from that more informed basis, more aware of who we are deep down inside. So for that purpose, it's very useful to look at what's happening in the stars, what's happening in the planets as they line up. And I think we all recognize as well that the zeitgeist reflects what's going on above, as above, so below. And we are in the midst of quite an amazing time on the planet, as is pretty obvious. You know, we have riots going on in various parts of the world, people trying to claim their autonomy, various parts of the world, big issues of whether they're going to survive or not in their current configuration, how that might be affected, how they might lose something. A lot of people are objecting to being conglomerated up with a bigger entity. I'm thinking of Hong Kong in particular, but that's not the only place. That issue is also true in England right now with Brexit. They're trying to decide if they want to be separate from Europe. They've apparently already decided they want to be separate from Europe, but then the details have been very difficult to work out, and there's a lot of contention, a lot of back and forth, and polarity, just like we're seeing in the United States. And we are seeing that in the United States as well. There's you know, the mission or the motion to impeach the president for apparently illegal acts, and then the defense of the president. Maybe it wasn't so bad to do illegal acts. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of an impeachable offense, the conservatives are saying, the Republicans in this country. So there's a battle going on. It's really quite interesting to see the polarity between different factions all over the world. It's not just here in the United States. So let's take a look at the chart and see what light it can shed upon these kind of things that we're thinking about in the zeitgeist, and as well in our own personal lives, which is a very important part of it. So there's two prongs to what we want to talk about. And here is the chart itself of the new moon, and I think you're going to notice right away that this is a very potent new moon in a couple of respects. One respect, we have at 4 degrees Scorpio, 25 minutes, the sun and moon, and at 4 degrees Taurus, by George, right across the zodiac from the new moon, we have Uranus. It's at 37, 4 degrees Taurus, 37 minutes. It's like 12 minutes of a degree, 2/10 of a degree away from a perfect 180-degree opposition. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that Uranus is definitely in a stronger place even than usual. And by the way, we saw this in the most recent new moon as well. The new moons have been lining up with Uranus the past couple of times, few times. And in this particular case, however, being so close, very close to the same degree, and being exactly opposite, an opposition is even more stronger than the inconjunct that we saw last time, or the trine before that. So this is a very, very Uranian time. And, you know, we do appreciate Uranus. It does kind of jar us out of our rut. There may be a way we've been doing things for a long time, and it's gotten old and stultified and maybe not so good for us, but we keep doing it the same way. It's hard to break free, but you know how sometimes when you go into a new situation, you know, you get into a new job, you go to a new place, you know, you take a long trip and spend 6 months in Thailand or something like that, you do have a different perspective. It just gives you a whole different way of looking at the day. And that's what Uranus can be like. It can give us surprises. It can give us the unexpected event that then leads to unexpected enlightenment as well when we really look into it. Now, my favorite description of Uranus comes from Robert Hunter, who had a strong position of Uranus in his own chart, as well as you might suppose. He was, of course, the lyricist for the Grateful Dead. All the Grateful Dead, not all of them, of course, but many of the Grateful Dead songs are attributed to Hunter Garcia. And Robert Hunter's line about, well, he wasn't writing about Uranus per se, but it really matches what we understand Uranus to represent. He said, once in a while you can get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. And that's the way Uranus strikes us. It's the unexpected thing, not what we thought was going to happen. It's big surprises. They can be very sudden. Uranus is kind of a lightning bolt, comes in sudden. And it is the awakener, and it is the trickster. So this energy is just the unexpected. It's as they had the court jester back in medieval times, coming up with a completely different perspective, or as we have comedians, stand-up comics in our own times. They come in from left field with a joke or a way of looking at things, and it completely changes the way we look at life. And that's what we need right now. That's what we need sometimes to get away from what seems to be the rut of just going through the same motions over and over again. Maybe it's getting old, maybe it's not entirely in our best interest, it's a dysfunctional habit pattern that we may be partaking of. So this is what Uranus is really good for. And the secret of working with Uranus is to be ready for that. In other words, as they say, to expect the unexpected. In other words, to stay open to possibility, to just be aware that not all of your logic can tell you how things should go. Sometimes this intuitional information that sneaks up on you from below, that also Grateful Dead talked about, sometimes you have to close your eyes to see. In other words, look inside. In other words, take intuitional information, not just the logical mind, because what do we really know with our logical brain is not always what's really happening. There's ways that we can tune in, and the outer planets lead us to other dimensions of experience, or layers of our subconscious, you could say, as well, that is really more profound, really more accurate in a certain way. And these planets that are further and further out seem to represent what is further and further inside of us, at the depths of us. So Uranus is very important that way, as is Neptune and as is Pluto, the three standard outer planet energies that we've been talking about in astrology ever since Pluto was discovered in the 1930s. And now we have Eris, which is another one which is beyond those three. And it's not quite in the same category, because that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto had a very definite patterning to it. It's kind of like wake up, see the universal oneness of all life, and recognize that we're in a process of deep transformation, always changing, always growing, always evolving, death and rebirth, symbolized by Pluto. So those are very important stages, and I think of those three outer planets as being a unit of a certain kind. I think all astrologers do, all Western astrologers take those very seriously, as they go with the other 7 planets, including the Sun and Moon, that were considered by the ancients, that end in Saturn. And Saturn is like the barrier, the end of everything. You can't get further than Saturn in a certain way. It had rings around it. It represents, when they discovered it by telescope, they discovered it had rings very appropriately. It is representing the outer limits of what we have in the physical 3D world, and then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto go beyond that. They have other dimensions associated with them, connections to people and places and events that are distant rather than close up, but we still have a correspondence there, and we can recognize, Neptune's very psychic. If you have a strong Neptune in your chart, you're tuned in. You recognize the universal oneness of everything, and you also have a psychic experience where, when the phone rings, it's bad news, or that it's a friend that you've been thinking about, or you just think about that friend and the phone rings. So anyway, just to comment that these outer planets have been really prominent in the new moon charts lately, and the full moons as well. And in this particular new moon, we have such a strong presence of Uranus that we don't want to also forget that we have a strong presence of also Saturn and Pluto. And Saturn and Pluto have a lot to do with transformation. The 60s were all about Uranus and Pluto combined. Now we have this 20 teens, which is the first opening square of that Uranus-Pluto. And so we're seeing kind of resurgence of some of those ideals from the 60s. And, for example, we had our first black president. We have a lot of the civil rights issues still percolating around. We have gay marriage now, and marijuana is legalized, for crying out loud. I mean, all these things that go back to the 60s are still happening in the culture today. But we also have the conservative backlash, just as we had in the 60s, and that's represented largely by Saturn. And it does turn out, when you take a look a little bit more depth and detail, that Saturn is very much a part of this new moon as well. Let me show you some of that. So if we wanted to take a look at Saturn in terms of its longitudinal aspects, that is to say, what happens around the zodiac, we can actually do that by choosing just a single planet and picking Saturn. And you can see that there's quite a few connections. One of them is that Saturn is located at 15 degrees of Capricorn. Mars is at 15 degrees of Libra, perfect square. So this is what's called a partile square connection between, and you can see at the bottom of your screen perhaps, it's 0.3 of a degree. So this is a very close contact between Saturn and Mars. But also, we see, by George, there's some other aspects between the Sun and Moon. It's about 1 degree quintile between the Moon and Saturn. Between the Sun and Saturn, you could add 12 and you get 16.25, and that, or 16.5, and that is actually pretty close to the 15 degree mark. So when you add the other 60, that makes 72. 72 is a fifth of the circle. So you can see that there is both the Sun and Moon and Mars making these strong longitudinal aspects, or zodiacal aspects, to Saturn, as well as there turns out to be a septile between Venus, which is a seventh of the circle, very close septile, less than half a degree between Venus and Saturn. And what do we see also? Neptune. Neptune is sextile. So it's connected also by parallel, as it turns out, to Jupiter. You can do 22.4, you can look here and it's 23, it's about half again of a degree. So that's a close parallel. So really, it turns out that Saturn is connected with Pluto by parallel. It has been for quite some time. And with Jupiter and with Neptune. And also with the personal planets, with Venus, with Mars, with Sun and Moon. And by the way, it also turns out to be connected to a slowing Mercury. So Mercury is at 26 degrees 52 minutes, and we know that actually it retrogrades 4 days after this new moon on the 31st of, on Halloween, on the 31st of October. It's only a degree away from where it's going to retrograde. It retrogrades, you can actually, in the time passages program, let me do this, you can actually check out where the next retrograde is. And if I right click, I can see the next retrograde takes place at 27 degrees 38 minutes, so it's less than a degree away, 4 more days to go, but it's less than a degree that it moves. It's just slowing down. So this is a strong Mercury slowing down, and its declination, Mercury's declination, is 22.4. So is Saturn's declination, 22.4. So is Pluto's declination, 22.4. So this is really powerful times, meaning that not only do we have a very strong Uranus in this picture, but because of all these planetary connections to Saturn, we have a very strong Saturn in this picture as well. So this is interesting stuff. I mean, if you think about the two principles represented by Saturn, represented by Uranus, Uranus is escaping from what we have going, which is the ordinary reality around us, the 3D reality that we live in, whereas Saturn is emphasizing that. Saturn is staying within that three-dimensional reality and holding us back from getting too far out of alignment. In other words, the best part of Saturn is the caution that is a necessary thing to kind of keep us from flying away. Do not make such a sudden move. You may want to stay the course. You may run into a barrier, an obstacle to what you're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of that right now. Mercury's slowing down. It's about to turn retrograde. It feels already like Mercury retrograde, where we have to take 2 or 3 times to get something done because it wasn't what we thought it was, and then we do it again, and then it's different than we thought, and then we finally get it right. And Saturn contributes to that, because Saturn is also energy that slows us down mightily as we're trying to accomplish things. So it's a very kind of a tough time right now. We're just slogging through, we're going slow, we're trying to find our way. The lessons of Saturn are long-lasting. So we are learning what we need to learn in this earthly environment, And we learn by attempting things and by changing it and trying it again. So, and with Pluto involved as well, because see, Pluto and Saturn being so closely parallel, they're really powerful, and they're only 5 degrees apart. So 5.5. So we do have a very strong presence of Pluto and Saturn and Uranus, which is again this whole transformational time. We're seeing the big picture of everything changing. We're at a crossroads. This culture is on a crossroads, which will intensify next year, because next year we have the actual conjunction of Saturn, the perfect exact conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in January, followed by movement away from that, and then followed by coming back together again in November. So in November of 2020 we have Saturn and Pluto together again, and squared, you see, by Eris, which stays around 23 degrees. It moves back and forth a couple of degrees, but it really moves very slowly in terms of its absolute motion, being the furthest point of its orbit. So Eris is a 556-year orbit. It takes 120 years, though, to go through Aries, because that's the aphelion, or the farthest point of the orbit. So, and when Saturn and Pluto come together, and Jupiter joins them as well in a triple conjunction in November of 2020, we find that Eris is also square to this position. And the factor of Eris, which is powerful now, which is in a tight square with Pluto even as we speak, that has a lot to do with it's a feminine warrior energy, an energy for articulating and acting upon only what is your deepest value, what you cannot not do, what is your bottom line values and understanding. So, and then you see people like at Greta Thunberg just articulating and telling the UN and addressing the UN and telling the countries of the world, you're letting us down, you're letting my generation down. She's 16 years old. I can't just go and play, because I know that the whole world is disintegrating in front of me, underneath me, and you, the leaders of the world, are not doing anything about it, or very little. You're paying lip service, you're doing a few things, in some cases denying it, as we see in this country right now with the top leadership. And, the fossil fuel companies are kind of wanting to keep selling oil and gas, but it's killing the planet. So we do have to address this, and the sooner the better, and I think it really has to be done immediately. We have 12 years, apparently, before it's going to be absolutely drastic, and a lot of that is foreordained. The sea levels will rise, the acidification of the oceans is happening. The litany, I think. The more extreme weather, the storms are more extreme, the temperature, the average temperature is going up. We see the hottest days on record every year now. So we do have to do something, and it has to be done soon. And this is kind of what's challenging the world, and this is where somebody like Greta standing up to power and saying, this is what has to happen. We can see that feminine warrior in action. If you want to know what the feminine warrior is like, think of Greta Thunberg. Just saying what she's got to say and doing what she's got to do, and coming from a very passionate place, and maybe even a slightly deranged place, but she's using that strength of character that she has to really try to make a difference and try to get people to change. And I think every one of us has that capability. So with strong Eris, as well as these other outer planets, I think we're all being challenged to find our self and find our depth and find our deep values and articulate those and act upon those. And then you don't have to be helpless. You don't have to feel like you're a victim. You don't have to say, well, the world is going to pot, it's going, to hell in a handbasket, and I'm not doing anything about it. You can say, at least I've articulated where I stand, and I've done my best. I've said what I can say, I've done what I can do, and then it's up to everybody else. And it's up to the whole zeitgeist to get itself together. So what we have is transformation on a collective level and transformation on an individual level affecting each one of us. And each one of us is like a piece of the hologram, and we make a difference. Because if every single member of a society understands that this is the direction we have to go, that's the direction we will go. Our leaders are not commanding us, they're subject to us, because the will of the people is more powerful than any individual leader. And that's something we've learned in this country through the years. That's how the civil rights movement happened. we get on the right wavelength, then we can really make a change. And that's very important to recognize. Now let's take a look at the chart of the United States, since we're talking about the zeitgeist and how things are happening, at least in this country. And what's very interesting about the chart of the U.S. is that we find Saturn at the same degree of almost 12 minutes away from being 15 degrees of Libra. And that's where Mars is right now. That's the square to Saturn in this very powerful new moon that has strong Saturn at 15 degrees of Capricorn. So pretty close square, within half a degree, to the Saturn in the U.S. chart. And the reason I bring this up is because Saturn in the U.S. chart is in the 10th house of the chart. This is a Sag rising chart. It's the chart that most astrologers use now for either 5:10 p.m. or this is 5:13:55, which is the chart that Dane Rudhyar actually decided that he rectified the chart to this time. It's still essentially the Sibley chart, with Sag rising, 12 or 13 degrees of Sag rising, and Libra on the midheaven. And then you see you have the powerful executive in this country is represented by the fact that Saturn's sitting right there in the middle of the 10th house of the chart, and it makes a square to the Sun, which is in the 7th house. So working with other countries is very important, which is the way the 7th house of a chart is represented by that country working with other countries, just like in a single in a natal chart, it's that individual working with other individuals. And we have a very strong 7th house of this chart. Both Mars and also Venus and Jupiter, along with the Sun, are in that 7th house, which is that there's a lot of international connection that we have. And sometimes it can be with military, which is where Mars comes in with violence, and sometimes it can be with generosity and foreign aid, which is another big factor in this country. And that's where Jupiter and Venus comes in the beginning of Cancer. So looking at the U.S. chart is very, very fascinating. And you can see that what's happening with this new moon is it's questioning or emphasizing the direction that this country has to take because of the 11th house, which is where the society is headed, and how you can contribute, were this to be an individual chart, where you yourself can contribute to where the society is headed. And the spiritual connection that we have with things, with seeing Scorpio on that 12th house cusp as well. But, not to get into a terrifically long and detailed analysis of this chart, but however, just to recognize that the executive represented by Saturn is being squared by Saturn in the sky right now, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing the challenge to the executive, the impeachment process, which is going to go forward in the House and is going to be done maybe within the next 30 days by the end of November. And then that will be, at that point, the trial in the Senate, and then we'll have to see how that plays out and whether the evidence that's presented by the House Democrats is strong enough so that the Senate Republicans, which is the majority in the Senate, will have to decide, this is, it rises to the level of impeachment and removal, and the president could be removed from office. It's possible. I mean, the evidence is very compelling. Some of us do believe. So we'll see how that plays out, but it is this challenge that we're in the midst of right now, and we can see that Saturn sitting here in the sky, it's not about to retrograde. It's going to keep moving forward. The next retrograde of transiting Saturn is actually not until May, and then it's all the way to Aquarius. And of course, that November time frame, December 21st actually, the next month in 2020, December 21st, 2020, is when Saturn and Jupiter will come together at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So Saturn, after May, when Saturn retrogrades, it goes back, joins Pluto here in the last decade of Capricorn, and then that's going to be a powerful time also, which is the December 21st time frame next year, a year and a half, a couple of months from now. That will be the first time that Jupiter and Saturn come together in an air sign. So that will be except for one exception back in the past, in the 80s. But basically it's been, I believe, in earth signs all this time, and this is breaking into the first time that it will be in an air sign, which is interesting. It's kind of representing also that age of Aquarius that we have going, that there's a way that this is the changing of the guard, the timing of the new the new millennium. It's not just the millennium happening, but it's also a new 2,000-year period of Aquarius versus the Piscean era, which was all about the faith in the beyond, rather than the faith in what's happening right here with humanity. This is more of a humanity-oriented time that we're coming into, with different religious goals and aspirations, which is why I think astrology is so important, because astrology is ruled by Uranus. It connects to Aquarius, and it is a new way of thinking about how we're connected to the cosmos. It's a very spiritual practice of seeing how these planetary alignments play out, which tells us it's not as simple as cause and effect in a three-dimensional world of rational thought. It goes deeper than that, to a spiritual dimension that we can begin to get a glimpse of if we study the astrology carefully and we understand more about what it's telling us. So that's the thing about the U.S. chart right now, which I thought was kind of interesting. And going back to the new moon chart itself, we do know that Mercury's retrograding in Scorpio. It will go back to about 17 degrees of Scorpio as it goes through. So you want to look at wherever Scorpio is in your own chart. If you happen to be a Scorpio, you're going to be going through kind of an identity crisis. You're going to be thinking about what is really up for you. What are you trying to accomplish in this lifetime? Take a serious look at yourself and where you're headed. It really does apply to each of us, that we're in this time. It's a very intense time. And we really have to look inside to be able to understand what it means for us and where our lives are headed right now with all this transformational energy in the picture. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to convey about this. I don't think we had any questions come in. And let's see if we can transition back. So I hope that this is helpful to people. I really do believe that the astrology is a very useful tool to be able to navigate these times and to get a better perspective on what's happening, to see it not just as an individual struggle like, oh my God, why is my landlord raising the rent on me and I may be homeless now, or I may have to find another place that's not working, that this place isn't working out, and so, whatever it might be that you're in the midst of, you can see it in a larger perspective, that it's a challenge that maybe is building character in you, that maybe it's time to move on from a job or a situation and take up a new path that is more closely aligned with your deep goals and deep desires. Find out what those are. Really study. Meditation is great. Especially with this Mercury retrograde coming up at the 31st. Self-study, trying to really introspect and understand where you're headed and what it's all about and what what things make a difference, how it all makes a difference for you. And we do have the most highest level of the astrology software, the advanced edition we call it, is available at a discount this month. I was supposed to mention that. And one more thing I'd like to mention is that, as many of you know, we have the mobile platform so far on iPhone, and we've been working very diligently, kind of behind the scenes, on making it happen on Android, and we have a new version we're bringing out for the Android operating system. And so that'll cover the other half of the mobile devices. So that's an exciting thing. We're not quite there yet, but we're in the final stages, and we'll be debugging it over the Mercury retrograde period, which is great for debugging. And subsequent to that, sometime in December, we expect to release it. So that's coming up, and something to let you know about. So that's it for me. Hope you're having the best time you can possibly have with this. I mean, I know it's tough times, but keep the faith and try to recognize that the universe is on your side, that things happen for a reason, that there's a way that you can guide yourself through and maybe be stronger as a result of what you've had to deal with, and looking at it from a big picture standpoint, which is so important right now. So have a good couple of weeks. Talk to you during the Mercury retrograde period in November. Bye now.